Hello, everyone. Matthew Kavidas here, as always, wearing my Bernie swag because Bernie or bust. No, actually, I barely left my dorm today, so I decided to wear. Uh, I guess you could call this sort of like a drag shirt or rag shirt. Or I don't know. Point is, it has no relevance anymore, so I wear it when I don't tend to be going out. Uh, First things first, we did have some technical problems. Oh yeah, Christian's here, by the way.
I'm always here. I almost don't need introduction anymore.
I thought we had some technical problems last week when we finished filming. I looked back on the whole 2 hours, and it kind of started in the middle of Matt Patrick introducing himself, and I was like, that's a problem. And just to make sure I wasn't going crazy, I used other devices and other accounts, same thing. But I checked back the other day and it fixed itself magically and started where it was supposed to start off. So that's weird.
Aliens. Yeah, pretty much.
I wish. I wish there was an alien story that we could cover. But no, sadly, we have to talk about just more depressing things. Oh boy. Okay. So to start off the night, we actually coincidentally have a story about this guy, Bernie. So it's actually kind of been a slow news week, at least in terms of big news, I guess you'd say. And I guess what you could characterize as big news nowadays is just the outrage porn that everybody seems to revel in.
The problem is, back when we had this show in like 2012, if someone said a crazy thing, like, Mitt Romney said his whole 47% thing, you could do that. Trump says crazy stuff every hour. So it's like watered down. Like yesterday, he said that Hillary Clinton should get rid of her bodyguards and see what happens. Or get rid of her bodyguards' guns and see what happens to her. That's what he said they should do. I feel like, but at this point, I'm just like, he says that.
Pretty much. It's just depressing now. Anyway.
Apathy.
Come on, let's try to be happy. Anyway, so back to Bernie. So what are you doing? I can't. What?
Having a cigar, being happy, man. What are you doing?
You look like the Joker. All right. Speaking of which, I did actually see a guy dressed as the Joker down the street from where I live when I was hanging out with my friends yesterday, and that was interesting. Anyway, so story from MSNBC, or at least that's where I happened to get it. Bernie Sanders was on, I want to say it was Morning Joe, where he stated that he wanted, it was Morning Joe, that he wanted, he didn't necessarily come out and say, don't vote for a third party, but he told at least people who support him to think a lot about a protest vote, and obviously a protest vote meaning a third party vote, because the reality is neither Gary Johnson or Jill Stein have the money or the traction in order to make too much of a significant impact on this election, at least as of now. So it's still seen as a protest vote, unlike, say, if you voted for Ross Perot in the 90s when he actually did have a shot. Anyway, so he's warning people who support him to think hard about casting that kind of vote, because obviously he is supporting Hillary Clinton. His main thing is not to get Trump elected, and of course the fear is that a protest vote or a third party vote could jeopardize that from happening. So, Christian, you have a unique perspective because in Canada, despite it being a first past the post system like it is here, third parties, there's essentially isn't a there isn't just a group called third parties. There's a third party and a fourth party and a fifth party and a sixth party, and it all depends on the results of the election. It doesn't hinge on the preconceived notions really of what the major parties should be. So what would you say would be okay? Well, first, actually, I want to. Can I present? Yeah, you guys are seeing this. You can see my screen right now, right?
I see your face, but there might be yeah, it's weird. Something's there's a very minor difference, but it's... What does it want me to do? I can see your face. That might just... It says you're presenting something, though, so I don't know. It might just be because I'm in the Hangout that I don't actually see what necessarily you're presenting to the screen. This is why I used to keep YouTube open.
Well, let me check. Hold on. I'll use my phone.
Okay.
Don't start going yet.
But do you mind if I give my unique perspective while you're setting stuff up then?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I bring this... It's actually very interesting with this context of the previous two Canadian elections, because if you don't remember, before the current election, the Conservative... Well, what happened was Canada has two major parties, like the US, the Liberals and the Conservatives. And the Liberals are called the natural ruling party, which basically means they've run the country for most of its history. They've run the country more than any other party has. And because of that, they're always usually one of the top two parties, of course, because they have that popularity. But 2 elections back, they actually ended up coming third for the first time, because the NDP, the other left-wing party, just kind of did a better job than them, presenting themselves as kind of a progressive alternative to the Conservatives. And I think that helped produce Justin Trudeau. It helped make the Liberals a better party. So I say that because, in my opinion, it's a constant frustration sometimes when you watch U.S. politics, because I think the loyalty to the two parties effectively creates almost a one-party system, because the parties end up fighting over an ever-decreasing center, if you know what I mean. Whereas if you have a diversity of right and left parties, they have a lot more. They don't become as similar, is what I'm saying, and it forces the parties to work harder to simultaneously hold the center and please their base. Now, I can see how there's a danger in that in the U.S., of course, because the right wing in the U.S. is a little bit weirder than the right wing in a lot of other Western countries, but I certainly think that would help if the Democrats and the Republicans had the fear of a third-party challenge like the Liberals and the Conservatives do here. Even if the party's not going to necessarily, lose its second-party status over it, but if it loses its few key seats and that ends up changing the election, I think if that fear were in them, I think they'd be a lot more responsive to their bases, just because those challengers are going to be responsive to their bases. They're going to play to that base, and the parties would have to be much more aware of them and making sure they're happy, which is something parties don't care about in the U.S. right now.
Well, and I guess the argument against that, at least in this election, is that Trump is most definitely catering to said base right now. Like, Gary Johnson isn't exactly pulling away a lot of hardcore conservative voters right now. He's actually pulling away the center. So
yeah, and I think there's something I think even then, for it, because then Trump would be relegated to a third party in a country with three parties. Or if the Libertarians were considered a more real party, or if the Tea Party had become its own party, well, then Trump would have been that guy. I don't think he would have been the Republican candidate. Also, considering that apparently he didn't even want to run. Apparently, this is just like something that got out of hand from stories I've heard. This isn't supposed to be happening.
This is the drunken rampage story. This is the I had too many glasses of bourbon, and then I woke up, in the White House with the nuclear launch codes, and I'm just like, what happened?
What did I do? Uncle, what happened?
And let it be clear that, if something were like to happen in our generation, we already have plenty of experience with that, and we know not to let that go out of hand when we played that quest in Skyrim where the Daedric princes got us drunk. So
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I can see Bernie's point now. I'm not going to listen to it because I live in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is going to go blue no matter what. It's going to go for Hillary Clinton no matter what. So I'm going to vote however the hell I want anyway. But obviously it's more of a concern when it comes to battleground states. And there's so-called battleground states. And I don't know. I just he put it nicely. Bill Galvin, who is the Secretary of State for Massachusetts, and that's in the sense of he helps run elections, not necessarily from a foreign policy standpoint. And he made a similar comment, except it was, third parties shouldn't even bother to run because they're not going to win. And while that is true, as Christian said, if more people actually did vote their conscience and didn't keep themselves confined to this 1v1 sort of mindset, it definitely would change the climate of our political atmosphere, because it would definitely make the people running more responsive to, regardless of party, more responsive to the needs of constituents and to the needs of their bases, because they'd fear that the other guy would take them away. A sort of thing that kind of developed that way was in Kentucky 2 years ago, in a sort of different sense. Allison Wondering Grimes, who was running against Mitch McConnell, kind of ran a conservative campaign, at least by a Democratic Party standard. And Mitch McConnell also obviously ran a conservative campaign, but the polls were very close. Well, in the last weeks of the campaign, he started saying how he loved Connect, which is Kentucky's version of essentially of Obamacare. And sure enough, he absolutely crushed Allison Wondering Grimes because she didn't say that she supported that.
Yeah.
That was him being responsive to the people that were voting for him.
Yeah.
And the reason why Allison Grimes didn't do that is because it was the center right versus the right wing.
Yeah.
And she did little to nothing to try to court the center left. And had she done that, it would have, he wouldn't have been able to somehow outflank her on the left and win.
Yeah. I also think a big part of how the problem, though, as far as getting people to vote for third parties in the U.S., is I think in Canada there's a little bit less of I want to have voted for the winning party, because I think Canadians, and maybe it's just simply because it really is this way, it's because Parliament because it's almost as if the executive and the legislative is merged, right? Because no one actually cares about the governor general. It's about the prime minister, who's like the majority leader in Congress. Because it's all about that. You know that it doesn't matter if you don't win the prime minister race, because you still got a Green Party person in the House for your riding representing you, proposing green policies in Parliament. And if you have a left-wing prime minister, it's even better, because he's probably going to be receptive to that Green Party voter and will maybe throw them a bone and pass some of their policies. So you end up saying, okay, it doesn't matter that the prime minister's not a Green. I didn't think the prime minister was going to be a Green, but it's pretty cool we got a Green in the House. I think you'd have to get Americans to view it that way. Because really, I think that's how I would vote if I could. I might not necessarily care that, Jill Stein is running for president, because Jill Stein's not going to be president, but I would certainly vote for the Greens in Congress if I honestly thought they had a legitimate shot in my district.
Well, and that's kind of the problem with a lot of third parties. As much as we want to prop them up, they don't do bullshit. I mean, a great way that my aunt and uncle are very, very active in the political scene. They're supporting Hillary again out of the fear that Trump will win. But a great point they made is that they refuse to back Jill Stein, even though she represents their views more than Hillary does, because she, along with a lot of the Green Party people and a lot of other third partiers, are the kind of people that just pop up every 4 years to run in an election. And then in between, they don't do much. You don't hear much about them. Not just because they're not running for anything, and because they're not running for anything. They literally just aren't doing anything. They go back to their jobs, their private sector jobs, and just kind of wait for the next election for them to become active again.
Yeah.
So it's really incumbent also upon third partiers, to the people who are in third parties, to actually do work in the community. What's Jill Stein done? I plan on voting for her just because I don't feel like I can vote for Hillary Clinton, and I most definitely will not be voting for Donald Trump. And Gary Johnson doesn't represent my views. But she's had very, 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 very. She was an elected town meeting member in Lexington, Massachusetts. No one even knows what the hell that means.
Yeah.
Right? Like, no one even knows what that means. She has zero government experience. And she wants to be president? No. Run for mayor. Run for state rep. Run for something small and get that experience so you can be credible in the next election.
I think maybe I think we might have deciphered the problem then. It's that I think third parties in Canada, a lot of them have a very good integrated, like the NDP, for example, they didn't just become that. That was like decades of them starting out on like a municipal level, organizing to get candidates elected in Western Canada, became over time a provincial party, and then that ground game, that expertise built up over time into something that could run federally and could consistently get a significant chunk of the seats, and have an impact. I think that's something a third party in the U.S. needs to go back and do, is look at building themselves up. Like, I think maybe that's part of it. Maybe there's too much individual glory in it and not enough. I'm going to understand that maybe not in my lifetime I will get that seat, but I'll have an impact that will get this party meaning something in 30 years.
Well, and the thing is that it's not just holding elected office. So I shouldn't give Jill Stein too much crap, because it also extends to Gary Johnson. Yeah, Gary Johnson was the 2-term governor of New Mexico, but what's he done since then? Run for president twice and climbed Mount Rushmore or Mount Everest.
Rushmore.
Good for you, dude. Now, what are you doing to help the community? Oh, that's right. Nothing.
Well, let's be honest. If you're a libertarian, the very goal is that I'm in government just to make sure government doesn't do anything. That's the purpose. So he's actually doing exactly what his supporters want him to do by not doing anything.
Pretty much. But
so I'll give him a pass on that. Yeah.
Well, even just activism for libertarian causes, like you never hear him at any sort of, at least that I'm aware of, at any sort of libertarian convention or any rally. Like,
well, I think when I've watched libertarians, though, that's something they're aware of and frustrated about him with. That's why there was such a push to get rid of him. The problem was that the alternatives were just so crazy that any libertarian who honestly believed in the movement was like, yeah, we can't find anyone though who's not crazy.
Like give Ron Paul, as much criticism as you want, because trust me, I will. He actually did shit when he wasn't running for president and wasn't running for Congress. He was actually pretty active in the libertarian movement.
He's from a different time, though, man. When politicians did stuff. That ain't today.
And they complain about not getting a lot of media coverage, right? Which is a perfectly valid complaint. But here's the thing.
You're not doing anything.
Yeah, you're not doing anything, number one. Number two, so Aaron Kanzer, who is a friend of mine, he's running for state rep in a neighboring district to mine. I'm hoping to get him on sometime soon. He was a student at Northeastern, and one of his professors was Michael Dukakis, who was a 3-term governor of Massachusetts and 1988 Democratic nominee for president. And when Aaron asked him, Governor Dukakis, what the most effective way of campaigning was, he said unequivocally, door knocking. Just as Zelda and Matt said a week ago. They said the same thing. I mentioned this last show too. A week ago, they said, yeah, the most effective thing is door knocking. So what I don't understand is, so they don't get a lot of media coverage. Since they don't focus in on specific areas, they have broad support rather than centralized support, can actually get, a few electoral votes. These minor parties, they don't go out and talk to people. They expect people to come to them. That's a bad idea. That's a bad idea. If you really want people to be supporting you, if you really want to have your agenda heard, screw the media. Go out and do it yourself. Find people yourself. Try to get people receptive because, yeah, they might laugh you off at first because you say you're from the Green Party, but don't start off with that. Start off with, these are my ideas for a better America. Lay that out, and they'll go, oh, that's interesting. And who are you with? And they'll say, oh, the Green Party. So, if you like, we can give you some information. You could come to some of our get-togethers, and we can try to promote this agenda. Be like, oh yeah, sure. Another thing, while I'm on that, no, don't make it about the Green Party. Don't make it about the Libertarian Party. Make it about the effort. Right? That's what gets people. If you make it about the party, no one is going to care. The only people who are going to care are the people who you already have under your wing.
Yeah.
Everybody else is going to be like, oh, the Green Party, or oh, the Libertarian Party. Like, who cares about them? And the average person is going to be like, the Green what? Libertarian what? What's a libertarian? But when you explain your policies and your stances and what you want to do, people will be more receptive.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellently said.
All right, that went on a lot longer than I thought it was going to.
I think it's more important than it initially seems. It's much deeper and more interesting than it is beyond, on the surface.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, you had actually another story that is also Bernie Sanders related. So do you want to lead in with that now?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. So if you follow Secular Talk, he did a video on this, but basically, Mother Jones, it is a website I have heard of and know nothing about outside of that. But anyways, so one of the editors there named Clara Jeffrey made a tweet saying, "Yo, I hate millennials because they support Jill Stein and they don't know what they're doing." Interesting considering what we just did.
That's funny because, like, basically everybody who reads Mother Jones is a millennial. So
Yeah.
Bad idea.
So anyways, so then Kevin Drum, one of the writers there, said, "Don't hate millennials, save it for Bernie Sanders." And he's basically, he goes on to say, look, millennials have been misled by Bernie Sanders because he has a few things, mainly trying to find. Yes, there we go. So he says he's the one who convinced them she was a tool of wealthy elites. He's the one who convinced them she was a corporate shill. He's the one who, when he finally endorsed her, did so grudgingly. So it sounded like he was, and it sounded like he was being held hostage. But then he gives the quotes that Bernie Sanders gave that led millennials to believe this. She gave a speech to Goldman Sachs, but that's true. He pointed out a true fact. She's raising money from rich people, also true. Or she supports the TPP. She kind of wrote that. That's kind of like the main thing she did as Secretary of State. So I just found it funny because he's saying, see, it's Bernie Sanders' fault that millennials don't like her because he pointed out the things that millennials don't like about it. And I'm like, well, he ran against her in the primary. That's who he was trying to win. And it's not his fault she did those things. It's her fault. So I just found it funny because he's angry at Bernie Sanders for pointing out things he admits in the article are true, as if Bernie Sanders should not have run against her in the primaries.
Well, that's basically everybody's criticism of Bernie Sanders is that, oh my God, you revealed the things that are wrong about her. How dare you? And it's like, and you don't expect her Republican opponent to do that in the fall, regardless of who it is? Like, this isn't, it's not like he pulled stuff out of his ass and was like, oh, here, look at this. It's reality. It's reality. It's what actually happened. And he just shined a spotlight on it. Honestly, I think a lot of people hated her already.
Yeah.
And because let me tell you, before the election even started, I asked, again, I'm a bit of a bubble, but I asked a few of my friends about her, and they're like, oh, I don't give a shit. Hillary Clinton, I have no particular interest in Hillary Clinton, so he shined a spotlight on it, but when the facts are already there, how can you blame him for showing the facts?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah. To me it's a worrying thing because it says to me, I feel, and I'm not sure this is Clinton. I can blame Clinton for this because it's not in her control, although I think she could do something to help it that she's not doing. He said her supporters, I think part of it's because there is a generation gap between Sanders and Clinton supporters. Also, side note, my favorite part of this is where they say people don't like Hillary Clinton, millennials don't like her because she's old. And I'm like, but they like Sanders and he's older. Yeah, what are you doing? Anyways, I think part of it is the generation gap there because I think, especially when I've talked to women who are middle-aged and a bit older, to them it's Clinton was so popular to begin with. Like, so to them, it's kind of they almost feel as if anyone who disliked, because this was an actual thing in the 90s, where people who liked her often had very sexist reasons for doing so. I think they're just pre-charged to think that. And I think to them, just that whole history of her being disliked for ridiculous reasons, like the famous story of her not having a cookie recipe, when she said that she didn't have time for that, and then she was attacked in the media for days for not having a cookie recipe. I think that if you have that context, I think for them, any attack against her is now ridiculous, because it's almost a boy who cried wolf kind of thing, just on a scale that's a lot longer than we're used to. I think that might be part of it. The other thing, though, is it worries me because it shows to me there isn't really any, because of that background, they have nothing prepared for an actual defense of her. And I don't think Clinton has done quite enough to arm them with that defense, if you know what I mean. Like, she hasn't done a speech where she's given them some sort of ammunition to go out against, I guess, Sanders supporters who keep pointing out these problems. Because at least I've read up on her, she's, at least for the campaign, turned around on quite a lot of the things that Sanders criticized her for. He changed her policies. You know, take it as you will of whether or not that's actually going to have long-term effects. But anyway, I think she has to make that more. She has to do something to gain the trust of those voters, because clearly, if polling is to be believed, and I take the polling with a grain of salt, I think she's going to crush it in this election. But if the polling is to be believed, and it is as close as it seems, look, it's not the millennials' fault. It's your fault that they don't like you, and you got to address that.
I just don't understand what the Clinton strategy is exactly, or the people who support her. Because the thing is that when Republicans criticize her, when conservatives criticize her, it's on bullshit. It's on stuff they can't prove, that best is uncertain, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's Benghazi or the, as you mentioned with the cookie thing, the cookie recipe, or it's the Whitewater scandal, or whatever it is, or her health.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely like to the regular person that's what turns them off of politics. That is part of what turns them off of politics, because they see bullshit like that and they're like, seriously? We're arguing about this, not actual policy, just this bullshit about whether or not she's gonna live, and she clearly is going to? Like, what is this? Yeah. So I don't understand why the Clinton people spend all their ammunition fighting against that. And then when real issues come up, they go, "Oh my God, I can't believe you could attack her on that."
Well, it's something that I think a lot of people do. I think we do our best to avoid it, although I'm sure sometimes we do it. It's much easier to attack the most ridiculous element of your detractors than it is to actually attack the ones with a legitimate point. Like, you see it a lot with, if you've ever watched, there was a good example, actually, Len Beck's show recently. Barack Obama was doing a speech where he was saying, like, yo, a lot of countries say we can't criticize them because, we've got our own problems. And then Glenn Beck just ends the video there and says, can you believe Obama hates America that much? But if you play the clip, but Obama's saying, but they're wrong, just because we have problems doesn't mean we can't, tell you to address your problems as well. It's because it's way easier than actually having to come up with a real argument against Obama, right? Like, it's way easier to do that. I think it's way easier to just take a ridiculous concept, like a ridiculous argument, and debase that than to actually debase the real arguments people have for or against you.
Yeah, I guess so. And yeah, it's easy for us to I guess, also attack Glenn Beck rather than anybody else. But uh, yeah, I sorry, I didn't mean to show you all my scalp, but
Yeah, it's fine. I'm good.
just
Viewers need the story, not me.
just like I was talking about earlier when I mentioned, going door to door is important. People care about issues. People, yeah, there's a significant segment of the population that's like that just eats up the bullshit criticisms of people, no matter what, the tabloid like criticisms. But the reality of the situation is most people don't care about politics. And if it gets to a political discussion, all people want is a better life. All they want is a better life for themselves, for their family, and hopefully for the community. So if you totally ignore the stupid criticisms, just ignore them. Like just completely, if the Clinton camp did this tomorrow, just any mention of Benghazi, I'm not going to talk about Benghazi. It's a waste of my time. Next. Or
Yeah.
I'm not going to I'm not going to talk about my health. I'm in perfect,
I'm in the best health of any presidential candidate of all time.
I have the greatest health. The greatest health. Greater than even China. China has lung cancer. I don't have lung cancer. All right. But China has better health. But anyway, no. If she came out and said, "I have, I came down with pneumonia, but other than that, my doctor says that I'm in perfect health for someone my age," and then said, "I'm not going to take any more questions on my health. Now, can you talk about policy?" People will respond to that because that's all people care about. Let's take my dad, for instance. I like to use him as an example a lot, right? My dad loves to get into politics with me, right? He adores it. And yeah, he kind of gets mixed up in the stupid scandalous stuff, but that's because that's the only thing that's on the news. But he tells me every time, almost every conversation that we have, at the end of the day, all he cares about is having a better community and having a better future for himself, for his family, and for his neighbors, right? What part of Hillary Clinton getting pneumonia factors into that? Never, not at all. Nor does how big Donald Trump's hands are. He doesn't give a shit. What he cares about is what are they going to do to increase job growth? What are they going to do to make sure that every dollar he earns is worth the work that he put into it? Those are the real questions. Those are the real questions that he wants answered. So when you have someone like Bernie Sanders who gets out there, or any politician who gets out there and says, "These are the issues. This is what I want to do about them," people are going to respond to that. People are going to say, "Hell yeah, that's what I want to hear." That's why Bernie is absolutely crushing Donald Trump in hypothetical polls, general election polls, whereas Hillary Clinton isn't. Because he actually talks about real issues. And that's the only thing he is willing to talk about. I forget what it was exactly, but I remember during the primary campaign, one reporter asked him a question. I sincerely forget what it was.
It was during one of the debates. He got asked about the email scandal, and he said, "Stop talking about damn emails."
Yeah, that was it. He literally just straight up said, "Who cares? That's not relevant right now. What's relevant is our positions on the issues." And that was probably one of the biggest applause lines. That was one of the biggest applause lines of the entire election. Not because he defended Hillary Clinton, but because he that in that moment highlighted how people don't give a shit about gossipy stuff like that. They care about the issues.
Pretty much.
All right. So next story, if I can find that tab. All right, cool. Next story is something that is actually relevant, even though it may be a bit gossip columny. Obviously, at some point last week, Hillary Clinton had her now infamous basket of deplorables comment, in which she said half of Donald Trump supporters are, just deplorable people. To which I say, well, okay. Let me put it this way. A lot of my friends, a lot of my fellow anti-Trump people were like, "Oh no, it's not half of Trump supporters; it's all Trump supporters." No, I don't think that was a good comment either on her part, and frankly, I'd like an apology from her too, not as a Trump supporter, but we've talked about this already on this show about how the people who support Donald Trump, for the most part, are people new to politics, much like Bernie Sanders supporters, who have been politicized by him because they have real concerns, because they have real issues. Yes, they might be bigoted. A lot of them might be bigoted, and they might harbor very deplorable feelings, but they're a significant chunk of the country, and we can't just write them off as these irredeemable people that we'll never get. That's another reason why we should have more third parties, and why I hate the idea of sort of safe blue and safe red states, because it really pits the country against itself and says, well, obviously these people are going to support this, and these people are going to support that. Have at it, see who comes out on top this time. No. The reality is, as I said earlier, people want a better future for themselves, for their family, and for their community. And to say, I'm not even going to pay attention to half or a quarter of the country because I'm never going to get their support. Pardon me. I'm never going to get their support. No, Hillary Clinton, you're not running to be the president of the people who like you. You're running to be the president of the United States. And
which should mean people who like her, because everyone should like her.
Sure. But that means that once this election is over, you have to be the representative for those, quote, deplorable people, whether you like it or not. You are their representative. And if you write them off so harshly during the election season, they're not going to come back around. They're going to become even more entrenched in their ideas, and it's going to further divide the country.
So, the way I saw that, and it's interesting because you've made me come around on it a bit. But there's two things. First of all, I think there's a very big similarity. I brought up Romney's infamous 47% line. I think there's a similarity there, and I think it probably comes with, I guess, the very kind of politics you're saying you don't like, that these people have just been engaged in so long that it's anything else is alien. I know somebody, it might have been in the Mother Jones article I brought up, how they said how Hillary Clinton, a lot of her team has been with her for so long. The other possibility is just in politics, you eventually, if you're someone who's that established, you've built an echo chamber because you're just surrounded by people who just believe in you and think you're the, they at some level they think you're the there's a reason they're staying, basically. There are reasons they believe in you. So if you end up in that environment for such a long period of time, maybe you just kind of end up thinking anyone who disagrees with you must have something wrong with them. Because look at everyone I know, they agree with me. I think there's part of that as well. That being said, either way, it's interesting because at first I sort of thought that was that kind of tough left-wing kind of thing. A lot of people on the left say they wish that people were more like. It was, being more harsh, being more like the right and just coming out and saying things as they are instead of being nice and tiptoeing around it. But I think you make a good point. The effect is nonetheless damaging because after this election, she almost takes on a beyond political affiliation and being the president, being the representative of every American, and it's not good if that person thinks half the population is deplorable and doesn't even deserve a seat at the table.
Yeah, and see, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I want more people to be like Hillary Clinton. More liberals to be like Hillary Clinton and Alan Grayson in their toughness. I want more liberal candidates to be like that, to not back down from a fight. But you have to pick the right damn target, right?
Yeah.
If your target is voters, guess who elects you? People who vote. And if you call them stupid, they will not vote for you. So if she said something like that against Donald Trump, which she often does, then I'd be like, yeah, straight on. Keep doing that. Because this election is it's you against him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense. But especially with her tactic of trying to court sort of people who are anti-Trump on the right, that doesn't help at all in that effort. So why she said that, I don't know.
Well, it might though. I think it might not work, but I think I can almost see how this is directly an attempt at doing that, because what you're saying is, look, you're not a deplorable person, so you don't support Trump, right? Because you're not a deplorable person. It's trying to say that. It's like all the not deplorable people don't support Trump. You know what I mean? And I think perhaps this was a very bad attempt at doing that, but I nonetheless think that's what this was trying to be.
Well, see, yeah, and I can see that, but everything she says is so carefully crafted. So how they messed this up, I don't know, because that was the totally wrong way to look at it, to go about it. At least in my estimation, I think the best way to have said something like that would to be, well, okay, maybe I don't, but there's definitely a better way you could have said that. And yeah, the people who are hardline Donald Trump supporters, they're most likely not going to vote for Hillary Clinton in November or at any point in their life. But again, that shouldn't be the deciding factor when it comes to any office.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the reality of it, though, is, I guess, so long as she isn't president, she shouldn't be held to the standards of someone who is. Like, if Obama said that, I would, hands down say, okay, that's why you're doing that. You're classier than this, Obama. This is not what you do. I think and it's the same thing, I think my opinion on this dramatically changes if she is already president. If she's not president, well, it's the horse race. It's as your friends, what's her name?
Zelda?
Campaign manager. Yeah, as Zelda said, at the end of the day, the reality is not as nice as we like to make it seem with campaigns, that you want everyone to get out and vote, and you trust that the American people have made the right decision if you lose. No, you don't. You don't. You feel that not everyone really deserves a seat at the table. Even the most benevolent campaign manager really doesn't actually think that. I think the average person doesn't even necessarily think that. I think there's quite a lot of Trump supporters who say that we're so beyond reproach that we don't deserve a seat at the table anymore. Like, so that's what I'm saying. Is I feel you can't hold her to the same standard as someone who's actually already been elected president, because right now they're in the horse race and it's a different environment entirely.
I suppose, but the thing is that you're running to be president, and when you write these people off, when you get into office and actually want to get stuff done, it doesn't help. And I guess
did it help Obama doing the opposite though? I don't know if that helped him.
Well, I think the difference with Obama is that he caved to the what I could call the professional right, or the right that was elected. The Republicans that were elected, he caved to them too much. That's my opinion. That's my assessment of it. So I don't necessarily think it's because of voters, and really that had kind of been, this culture of partisanship has kind of been brewing for quite a few years, and it's really beyond the control of any one candidate. But the best thing you can do is, again, United States, we're supposed to stand united. It's based kind of like on the idea that Voltaire, I believe it was Voltaire, said that, I may not agree with what you think at all, but I damn sure will lay down my life to make sure that you can think that way.
Yeah.
So that really has to be the line of it, I think. And well, it definitely is a different standard when you're running for an office versus when you are in that office. That being said, people have long memories.
Yeah.
People have long memories. So when Hillary Clinton does become president, and she says, "Oh, all right, I want to get this done," the congressman's going to say, "No, because you called my constituents deplorable. You said my constituents were bad people, and I want to get reelected." So as much as, someone who supported you in an election, who may agree with that comment, I need to get reelected. So no, I can't help you on that, because my constituents will run me out of this office with knives and pitchforks if I support what you do here.
Yeah. Fair enough.
All right. You want to do one of your stories?
Sure. Do another one of them. This is tough. I had a Colin Kaepernick one, and I had a China one. Which one do you want to do more?
I guess Colin Kaepernick works.
Okay. So this one, I kind of wish we had like a title thing for every news story we did, because I kind of was like, the Japanese do everything longer. That's the idea for the story name I had. Anyway, so it's a story. For those who don't know about what Colin Kaepernick is doing, live under a rock. Basically, he's not been standing for the national anthem during NFL games. A lot of players, not only in football but in soccer and other sports in the U.S., have been following suit. And basically, he feels that I guess you could say the country is not representing the values the flag purports to support. That's the best way I could word what he's doing. But this article brings up a woman named Kimiko Nezu. I can't speak Japanese. Give me a break. But she's in her late 60s. But since her 20s, she has been refusing to stand for the national anthem in Japan. which she says is militaristic and doesn't, support the post-World War II values Japan purports to stand for. So it's a similar argument, because for those who don't know, Japan has had the same national anthem since about 800 AD. It has not changed. So maybe some outdated values in that anthem at this point.
And we will burn Korea. Oh, wait. Shit. Get rid of that line. Get rid of that line.
But in Japan, that's actually illegal. She's been fined, she's been suspended from her job as a teacher. She's had right-wing mobs chase her down the street and send her death threats. Yeah. So it's interesting. This article goes on to give a lot of other examples, but hers is just the most interesting case because she's been doing it for so long. It makes me wonder. I doubt Kaepernick's aware of all these other characters, but nonetheless, it's interesting to bring up that there's some precedence of this. That he's not like. I just think it's interesting that there's some precedent of this, and it's not unique, and I think it's worth mentioning. And I also think it does say something perhaps good about the U.S. that despite all the idiots who have, given some jingoistic arguments about why he should stand for the flag, that he's nonetheless been able to do it without losing his job.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that I have heard stories of whatever team he plays for. I don't know. I frankly don't care. I don't care about football. Whatever team he plays for is thinking about releasing him, and obviously no team is going to sign him because of this, and not to mention he actually isn't apparently not that good of a player. So
he was at one point, but he had an off season last year, and he became a second string quarterback.
All right.
Happens. Yeah.
There. I couldn't even repeat what Christian just said because I have no idea what that means. But apparently that he had a bad season last year. So yeah. So yeah, people aren't gonna, he's not. If he might now, he could fight that. He could definitely go to the courts and fight that, and he could very well win. Because as jingoistic as the defense for standing for the flag is, I imagine that a lot of right-leaning judges and justices, if it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, are going to stand by him because it is an expression of his freedom of speech to sit out of the national anthem, as it is for anybody else. Now, if he does lose his job, I will not be shedding crocodile tears for him, because he's a lot better off than I am and can most likely make it a lot better off than I can losing his job. So again, that being said, it's for the wrong reasons, so that's the concern. Not necessarily that he lost his job, but the reasons behind it. Wrongful termination, sort of. Yeah. But I am definitely glad it is not illegal. Because that's a scary thought. For you, whether you want to piss on the flag, you want to, flip it off, I wouldn't want to do that. I would condemn anybody who did that. But you're allowed to. And I kind of like that you're allowed to express yourself in almost any way you want here without fear of legal retribution. And in the secure knowledge that if you do face repudiation for it, that the government will stand behind you and tell you that, and defend your right to do whatever it is you did. So, and whether you think he should have done it or he shouldn't have done it is irrelevant in this conversation. The point is that he's allowed to do it. You may not like that he did it, but he's allowed to do it, and that's, I think, my dad and a lot of people, frankly, often say how fortunate it is to live in the United States, and a lot of times I kind of roll my eyes at that because there are countries that do have better standards of living. And yet, at the same time, I look to France with their sort of freedom from religion rather than freedom of religion, and obviously Japan with their aggressive patriotic laws, if you will. And I saw for a second saying, yeah, it actually is really nice to live in this country.
I think it's important to do this twofold, just because I brought up the Glenn Beck story earlier and saying what kind of, having the whole fault. I think there's this, misunderstanding that somehow liberals don't like, the U.S. or the country they live in because they, make complaints about things. Be better, but I think it's important to do this story just to say, we're aware of the fact other countries have problems too. We just don't live there, so we often aren't aware of those problems.
Okay, even when I was a little kid, I could never understand that sort of, everybody in politics always has a favorite one-liner, a favorite, very unnuanced jab, whether it's guns don't kill people, people kill people, or, if you don't like this country, then you can leave, or any equivalent on the left, anything you can think of. I never understood the if you don't like this country, then you can leave thing. Because it's like, well, first of all, that's kind of hard for a lot of people. Yeah. Like, obviously, with Colin Kaepernick, it's a bit easier because he's got, again, like
he can get into the CFL so easily.
But at the same, just, I never understood that because my family has always been a family about civic engagement and about community engagement and helping those around you. So when we see a problem, we're apt to say something about it and to want to change it because we want the community to be better. So when someone says, oh, you want the community to be better, in a sense, you want the community to be better, then leave, it's like, where'd you get that from? Like, that's like, this is your line of thinking, this is my line of thinking, and it's just like, shh. I know I do that a lot, but it's like, that totally came out of nowhere. Because the thing that most bothers me about that is that the United States was founded as a country that said from day one, let's do better than everybody else. And let's do better than we ourselves have in the past. So when someone says, if you don't like this country, then leave, then I'm like, all right, so basically what you're saying is you don't want any change in this country ever, good or bad. You just want it to stay exactly the way it is. You have complaints too. Like, you see that there are some things wrong in society. Why shouldn't you leave then too? No, because that doesn't make sense, because that's not a very intelligent argument.
Yeah, that's, like, I don't know where that comes from. Even when I was a conservative, that was not one I made.
I just, I get that people can say, some arguments and not think about them and think they're great. But that's just one where I'm like, how can you say that and not realize you sound like an idiot?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think part of it is that there's a fear of, I don't know really, actually. I had a good, I don't know, maybe it comes from some fear of the other kind of deal. I don't know. usually have a theory about where these things come from, and I just don't this time.
I honestly have no idea, because it's just, you know, I don't like calling people stupid. I like to appreciate everybody's opinion. But that one saying is so demonstrably dumb. I don't know where you get it from. I honestly don't. Because, like, that's the equivalent of say my room's a mess, right? My mom
Yeah.
comes in and says, "You need to clean your room." And I say, "Oh, well, if you don't like my room so much, why don't you leave?" What? I mean, okay, there's an exception there because she's my mother and she like owns the house. But
yeah,
the other thing is, it's like that's a complete like. There's a fork in the road. One road leads straight ahead, and the fork leads completely in a different direction, and you took that fork.
Yeah.
And I get so confused whenever somebody uses that line because it makes no sense. It comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I keep saying the same thing over and over again, but you get what I'm saying. It derails the conversation. It distracts from the actual discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you know what? Maybe I've discovered where it comes from. I think it's probably from people who are just so frustrated by an argument,
Mm-hmm.
or so frustrated by their inability to support their argument, that they just come up with that because it's the last line of defense that they have.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's my guess. Well, I think you get to a lot of things like that. Anyway, yeah.
It might also go to, a lot of people have this weird perception, regardless of their political affiliation, that this is my country.
Yeah.
Or when thinking of their group of friends and their family, this is our country.
Yeah.
Fuck you, no it isn't. It's everybody's country. Everybody has a saying. And if you don't like that, then you can leave. Because that's how it works around here. What?
Very un-American. It's very un-American to say someone in this country doesn't deserve a voice.
Exactly.
It's group's country. It's interesting to take this in a completely different direction because Sam Cedar has decided to just talk about Milo for once because I guess he felt that would be.
Why?
Why?
Why would you ever want to talk about that piece of shit?
I don't know. I guess he felt like it, but he basically. I think he said, "I'm just going to do one Milo video because people keep telling me to do it, and then I'll just demolish this guy once and then never address him again." And it's funny because I was expecting him to get like inundated with like Milo supporters, and he just didn't. I think he did such a good job. They're like, we're actually just not going to say anything.
Well, that's because all Milo supporters are like two guys in the basement that have multiple internet accounts.
Yeah, pretty much. But anyways, it was interesting because in that Milo kind of made a "if you don't like this country, leave" kind of argument where he, when they were talking about Colin Kaepernick, because they asked him about that, because Milo's going on this big thing, we have to stop being so nice. People just got to say what they believe. Got to get rid of this PC culture. And then when they like MSNBC, people's like, so what do you think about Colin Kaepernick? He's like, if you don't like this country, you got to leave. And he was like, wait a second, you can't hold both of those opinions.
Oh, I remember. Yeah. Didn't the host straight up say like, you're an idiot, and then like cut the interview off?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I heard about that actually.
Yeah. It was funny because they were letting him go. They were letting him go. They were like kind of looking at each other, but they were letting Milo go. They're like, okay, we'll let this guy talk a bit. Then they do that, and they're like, okay, we're done.
Well, okay. Here's the thing that I don't understand is that he can say something ridiculous like that, and a host will go, okay, we're cutting this interview because you're a lunatic. Justly so.
Yeah.
But Donald Trump says something equally or even more outrageous, and they're like, "Oh, that's very interesting, Mr. Trump."
I think part of it though is Milo doesn't really have a lot of support. Let's be honest. Like it says a lot that Sam Cedar's small viewer base was able to completely destroy his on the like to dislike ratio in that video. Whereas Trump has like almost 50% of the country that you're kind of scared of offending by being dismissive of him.
I guess so. I mean, yeah, okay, I can see that. Especially because, well, the reason my bigger issue is, obviously now it's a lot harder because a lot of people like Donald Trump. But what about back in the day? Back in the day when Trump was at like 2% in the polls still.
Yeah.
You could have easily said, "No, you're an idiot. What you just said makes absolutely no sense. We're cutting you off."
But even then, you can kind of see why they let that go, because they're like, he's not going to win. This guy's crazy. All the other Republicans are so incredibly boring. Let's just bring this guy on because he's funny. Like, he's so stupid, it's funny, and we'll let him go for a bit, and everyone will know it's in good fun, and we won't take it all too seriously. Oh, what the heck, he won! Like, that's what happened. I'm under the impression that's what occurred.
I suppose.
This is all me guessing, of course. I don't think that's an excuse either. I think that in itself is a problem. It's not an excuse. It's an explanation of the problem. But nonetheless, that's what I think happened.
All right. Well, next story. Okay, so let me get something straight. I didn't think Jason Conder could, if that's how you pronounce his name, could get me interested or excited about the Senate race that he's running in, and now I am. And that says a lot because so it's kind of weird the way elections work in the US with governors and senators, because there are a lot of times where there can be a Senate election and a governor's election going on at the same time, such as Massachusetts 2 years ago, and one's neck and neck, and the other is like, okay, the guy in this party is definitely going to win. So, for instance, in Massachusetts 2 years ago, Ed Markey was running for the U.S. Senate, Charlie Baker for governor, and it was neck and neck with Charlie Baker and Martha Coakley for governor, but Ed Markey, it was a foregone conclusion that he was going to win. And that's kind of how it appeared to be in Missouri. It appeared that it was kind of going to be neck and neck, but mostly leaning towards Chris Koster beating Eric Greitens for governor in Missouri. And then it was pretty obvious that Roy Blunt, the U.S. Senator from Missouri, was going to win re-election pretty handedly. Well, there's a new development. Did you get a chance to look at the ad, Christian?
I saw that. I saw you. So it was like the best campaign ad ever, but I didn't get to see it.
So Jason Conder is, again, the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senate in Missouri this year. He currently is the Secretary of State of Missouri and a war veteran. And in his, I believe, war veteran, at least he served in the military at one point. And in this campaign ad, he's blindfolded, and he has the parts to some sort of rifle. I'm not entirely sure what it is. I didn't actually get to see what kind of rifle it is. But it's a disassembled rifle, and while he's blindfolded, he puts it back together. And as he's putting it back together, he's saying, he's talking about gun control. And so you expect from a Democrat from Missouri, it's probably going to be, I support the Second Amendment and, oh yeah, guns. No. In this case, he's saying, yes, of course, I support your right to bear arms, but I also support common sense gun control laws, which has kind of been the talking point of Democrats, whether blue dog or not, so far. And at the end, he finishes assembling the rifle, he takes off his blindfold, and he says, "And I'd like to see Senator Blunt do that." And I was just like, damn. Damn.
Oh,
And
the
that's
burn.
And first of all, I'd like to say, myself, a Democrat, supporting Democrats, Eric Greitens, who's the Republican nominee for governor, he's also a veteran. So I'm kind of glad that Jason Conner beat him to the punch on this. But, it really plays into the whole, I guess, fake support of the military that a lot of Republicans have, like Roy Blunt.
Yeah.
Because Roy Blunt never served in the military. He's a civilian. He's always been a civilian, and so that's why I kind of get excited about Democrats who serve in the military, because they kind of they take the sort of Hillary Clinton or Alan Greason approach of, all right, let's cut the bullshit. Like I know what it's like to support veterans, to support the military. This asshole who just wants to make money doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually interesting because the current person who holds the riding I live in, riding being the Canadian version of a district, is a very high-ranking former female who's, quite has a badass history. So it's interesting, and she's a liberal, of course. That's the because, and it goes back to something we say a lot against their own interest. And I think quite often, a lot of veterans I don't even know if veterans buy into it, but people who want to say they support veterans buy into this concept that the Republicans are the ones who actually care about the veterans. And I think it's great when you see that, because then it's just, okay, yeah, there's a member of the military, he's the Democrat, he must support veterans. Like it forces you to, because I think a lot of people who don't look into politics, they just take that on a surface level and say, okay, but if it's actually there, the Democrat is a member of the military. I think it changed it for the person who wasn't in the military and wants to pretend they support veterans, or honestly thinks they're supporting veterans. I think it makes them more seriously, question their assumptions, and it's great.
Mm-hmm.
And just the optics, like doing the assault rifle blindfold, is just hilarious, and I think that's brilliant.
I know it's a brilliant ad because of that, but maybe it's just because I come from a military family. Regardless of political affiliation, it always sort of, catches my attention when a candidate has served in the military, regardless of party. It really makes me believe that in one way or another, they actually do care about veterans. They do care about the military. Now, obviously, there are a lot of people who never served in the military who do care about veterans and do care about the military. So it's a presumption a lot of people shouldn't make. But obviously, when you have had that experience, it's a lot more likely that you will be doing what's right. But yeah.
And can we just point out briefly? Can we just remember Donald Trump's a draft dodger?
Yeah.
Can we just continue to forever bring that up?
Yeah. Oh boy. Just, I don't know.
And let's remember the the reason the U.S. had a draft, the historical, theoretical reason why you have one. It's so that the rich and the poor both have to be, when you send someone to war, the rich and the poor both have to take part. No one gets, to avoid it, so that the country as a whole thinks about it a lot more. Because right now, of course, a lot more poor and minorities end up in the military. So Trump was even purposely avoiding it considering that was the very purpose it existed, was to make sure people like him didn't support war for no reason.
Well, here's the thing: is that he could have pulled a George H.W. I mean, sorry, not a George H.W. Bush. He actually did serve in war and was a war hero. His son, I mean, George W. Bush, who just kind of bullshitted it. And it's like, oh, my daddy's rich, so I can get away with, I can get away with being in the military, not actually doing anything. He could have done that, but no, he didn't even have the balls to do that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
So I guess, unless I do a little digging and find something that I significantly find deplorable, if I can use that word, about Jason Condor, I think that ad has got his endorsement from me.
Yeah.
Because, this was a race. This was a race that a lot of Democrats were writing off, again, as I said earlier, writing off as a sure win for Roy Blunt. Roy Blunt was easily going to win. It's a foregone conclusion. Doesn't matter anymore. And then he comes out with this. Like, it's brilliant. It's just an absolutely brilliant ad. And, obviously before I was hoping he won, but now I'm really gunning for him. Forgive that. And interesting thing. So, just real quick about polls. So, most polls so far has had Blunt with a pretty steady lead, not a big lead, but a lead. Kind of how it was expected. It was expected that Blunt would win, not major win, not like in 2010, but just a win. Latest poll from Emerson College, not the greatest poll, mind you. It doesn't take into account the third partiers and is kind of small, but latest poll has a margin of error of 3.6%, has Blunt at 40 and Condor at 42. And that's the first poll this election season that I've seen that has Condor above Blunt.
There you go.
So interesting development.
Yeah. It reminds me of that. There was a movie I saw a while back, but it was about a politician who was running for governor of New York, and he kind of ends his campaign doing this like long rant about all the bullshit you do when you're doing a campaign. Then it ends up it reminds me of that. I don't know why I said that, because no one's seen that movie. I'm beginning to realize I'm making a reference to something only I understand, so never mind.
What movie was it?
It had Justin Timberlake is the main. I remember what it was called. It might not have been Justin Timberlake. I don't know. It was a weird movie. It was a weird movie. Interesting, but weird. It didn't do well. It had bad ratings. I don't know if it even helps my argument if I was making one. Anyway.
All right. Well, so next, do you want to do your next story?
Okay. So recently, let's just make sure I get the time, how recently, but it was a week or two ago. There was the G20, so it was about 10 days ago. So just over about 2 weeks then. There was the G20 summit in Hangzhou, China. Hangzhou. I feel like that's closer to actually how it's pronounced than my Japanese pronunciation earlier. But it was interesting because when the 19 other countries arrived in China, they arrived in an empty city. Yes, the Chinese had shut down every factory in the city, had given the residents free travel expenses for a vacation, and had quietly gotten rid of every subversive element in the city, so to speak. This being a city of about in G20. So I want to just congratulate China for fixing all the problems in a city over the course of like a few months in preparation for the G20. Here's the thing. I just get the feeling that these international kind of meetings, whether it's NW20, they seem to promote very bad. They seem to be excuses to do very bad things. I've read a lot about how the Olympics and the FIFA World Cup in Brazil has also given the government over that time period they were building up to it justification to pass a lot of anti-democratic laws. They've got a lot of security cameras throughout the city. They've sent in police death squads into the favelas to get rid of people there. You even saw in Toronto when they had the G7, the police were doing a lot of unconstitutional practice that they were later, putting people into they called quarantine zones for indefinite amounts of time for the G7 summit, so they wouldn't go back out and protest after they'd been, imprisoned. So I don't know that just to make it broader than look at China. The Chinese government does crazy bad things sometimes. It seems like we are a little bit too willing to give the government undue power when there's some international event going on. It's like, democracy's great, but when the neighbors come, we got to put on the good dictator face for them,
Well, that's certainly an interesting way of putting it. Yeah, I sort of, obviously you mentioned the Olympics in Rio. In the lead up to that, that was a big concern of mine. I don't really care about the Olympics to begin with. I'm not much of a sports person. Well, I'm not much of a sports person.
Yeah.
I like that it's the world coming together. I'm not much of a sports person, so I don't really care either way anyway. But I really wish, it's almost as if, if they're going to do this and there's no way we can really stop them from doing that, I really wish they would do it at some mountain retreat like you see in sort of like Austin Powers movies or whatever, just because it would at least mitigate that sort of issue. But the real thing is that, so China literally just cleaned up the streets of one of its worst cities overnight. Okay, if you did that, how come we can't do that now? How come this, like, obviously they used authoritarian means and it's not the exact way we want to go about it.
Yeah.
But if you could do that overnight in one city, why not just take, a month's time to do that? What?
You can't, it's like literally closed all the factories in the region, so there was no pollution in the air. They got rid of the overpopulation problem by simply removing the people. In general, unless it's like, we're going to take all the people and move them into Russia. Thank you, Russia. Like, they can't just do that. Although that would be a very funny thing to see happen. Just some people in like Siberia wake up one day and there's like 200 million Chinese people just building houses in the middle of this like field, and he's like,
no. They're all just like, they're in the middle of a field, just like all kind of walking around aimlessly, talking to each other. It's like a Sims game. It's like a Sims game. What the fuck? Well, okay. Have you ever played Roller Coaster Tycoon 2?
Yeah.
It's like making like, as part of the park and then realizing you need to sell it or whatever, so you cut off access to the rest of the park so no one else comes in, but then there's just like that mass of people that just stay there and keep walking around talking to each other. That, I feel like that's what would happen. And
pretty
like
much.
the people of Russia would just wake up and be like, what the hell?
I did not say that.
To quote Patrick Star from SpongeBob, let's just take all our problems and push them somewhere else.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
But really, I mean, if they're going to put that much time and energy, even though it was a temporary and bad solution, into doing that, is it really going to be that awful and hard to actually fix the problems? No. So just do it.
Yeah. Yeah, as an authoritarian country, you think you could just do it.
Well, that's the thing.
You don't need to go through a legislative process. You just say, we are going to arbitrarily enforce pollution laws now.
That's the thing, is that, and that's why, you know, that's why the Trump presidency would be such BS, you know, in reference to his candidacy, because he's like, oh, I'm going to do all these great things. No, you won't. You're just going to do what makes you look better and makes you more powerful.
Yep.
Same thing with the Chinese government, you know. Oh, you know, we're communists. We believe in seizing the means of production and giving it back to the worker. No, you don't. You believe in lining your own pockets. If you actually cared, you would have done that already.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you can do that right now. You can do that right now, but you don't actually care, so you don't do it.
Yeah. 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 That's that's something I'd consider with China, because they could arbitrarily, if they could actually address this pollution problem, and not only would they have to address this pollution problem, because China's doing this because they have this soft power deficit, so they want to put on a good face to the world, so that people say, "Oh, China isn't that bad." Well, if you actually just address the solution problem, not only would you actually not be that bad on that front, but you also would have looked good. So you would have done two things instead of one, only temporarily even. And like anyone who was aware of the problems in China knows that you did that. So you didn't even do your main goal. You achieved nothing, except give people free vacation, which I guess is pretty cool. I guess maybe I don't know how much vacation money you gave them.
I'll give you a 10% raise. Here's a penny.
That's rough. Yeah.
I actually stole that from George Lucas, but
okay. Yeah. I don't know.
Anyway, I was gonna go on to a story about Sadiq Khan, but it really doesn't matter. I'm tired. I want to go to sleep. And yeah. So to sum up the night, I didn't agree with Hillary Clinton's comment on deplorables. Third-party candidates should have a better shot, but they should actually work for having that better shot. They shouldn't just kind of expect it. And yeah, the way to solve China's problems is to push them into Siberia.
Pretty much. Agreed. Everyone in agreement? Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
See, they wouldn't have to do that in China. They'd just see, everybody in agreement? All right, well, if you aren't, you're going to get killed. So everybody's in agreement.
You're in agreement? Nope, irrelevant. We're doing it.
It's pretty much. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please join us again next week. Same bad time, same bad channel. And as always, remember, have malice toward none.